Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the first recap of 2023. Happy New Year. Hope you got your plans ready because things are not going to get better. Let's get started. Just got back from the United States for the holidays, and it was really weird because I read something. I just read something that kind of put into perspective the way that I feel that people behave in the United States. Everybody's always complaining. Nothing is ever right. Like my latte, super cappuccino, super frappuccino didn't come out the right icing flavor, or like the internet isn't fast enough. There are 8 billion people now in the world. 8 billion people. If you have your own home, you have complete meals that you eat, if you have clean water, if you have a cell phone, you're able to access the internet, and you went to the university, that's 7% of the world. I don't know if you guys realize this or not. Most of you guys watch from the US. There's a handful of you from the UK and Australia and other Western countries, but we literally are the 1%. Even if you're living in poverty in the United States, you're still better off than the majority of 730 million people. 730 million people, probably more than that. It's actually 7 billion, 700 million people. You're literally better off. So be grateful. I think that it's that kind of reflects on, your business, the things you want to do. So just keep that in mind, because only 8 of the 100 people in the world live above 65 years old. And it's funny, I recently saw the healthcare in the United States and Canada, for example, isn't very good. Colombia even has a better healthcare system, according to the WHO, to the US and Canada. And I pay $60 a month for my health insurance. And it's like the prepaid, I get to go see a knee doctor directly. But anyway, get your goals right. Be thankful, because you are the 1%. Retail in the stock market sold $3.1 billion in the last week of 2022. So the end of the year, or the year 2022 ended, I should say, with the 3rd worst week on record, driven by the Tesla outflows. Tesla didn't have a very good week. I'm going to give you all the numbers, but they crashed on disappointing deliveries, even though they had record deliveries in their history. There's obviously concerns about the rising interest rates and the high inflation. I'm gonna tell the guys to process the video, show that link that I gave you guys, but you guys can see there, if you guys are listening on the podcast, food in elementary schools and secondary schools went up by over 250%. Eggs went up by 50%. Airline fares 36%. Butter and margarine 34%. Anything else that kind of sticks out here? Public transport 24%. Rice, pasta, and cornmeal went up by 17%. Energy 13%. Coffee 14%. That's another thing. I just want to say one more thing before I kind of get into the depth of the recap. At 2020, I would go to Five Guys, the burger joint. I don't know if you guys have it on the West Coast or the Midwest, but I went to Five Guys, 2 nice burgers, fries, 2 drinks for 2 people was $20, max 24. And now I went to Five Guys, and it cost me just by myself $20 for a hamburger, a drink, and fries. I mean, we're talking about 100% inflation in 2 years. If there was ever a time for you guys to learn how to trade or start your side hustle, you can literally get an account with just $100. There's actually people that'll offer you 50,000, 100,000 funded accounts, and I'm going to explain that to you with some videos I'm going to do. But it's time you guys did something, because if you think your salary is going up 50% a year, that's the only way that it's going to keep up with inflation at this point, you're sadly mistaken. And on Michael Burry, if you guys didn't know, he is one of the only men who predicted the 2008 and 2009 crash and also made billions of dollars off of it. He said, and I quote, "Inflation peaked, but it's not the last peak of the cycle. We are likely to see CPI going lower, possibly negative in the second quarter of 2023, and the U.S. isn't going to be in a recession by any definition. The Fed then will cut, and the government will stimulate, and we will have another inflation spike. It's not that hard. So prepare yourselves, because the preppers were right." Well, I got it back. You ready? Thursday, market was lower. A lot of market data supports that the federal bank, the Federal Reserve in the United States, will have to continue raising rates. Basically, the economic indicators that are coming out are telling them that, quote unquote, the economy is still hot based on the job and labor market data that came out this week. So that's definitely not good for you and I, because if they keep increasing the interest rates, that's a big problemo for you and I. Overall, stocks for the week in the United States were mostly positive. Canada was also positive, over 2%. Latin America was mixed, with the Mexican exchange going up almost 7%. Africa and the Middle East, Egypt hit almost 10% positive, most positive of all. And then in the far, far east with Asia and Australia, you have the Hang Seng in Hong Kong, which went up over 6%. Bitcoin and other crypto news, the biggest a-hole on the planet right now, Sam Bankman-Fried. I modeled the hair after. What do you guys think? He's going to plead not guilty to criminal charges in federal court. The one-time millionaire has pleaded to 8 criminal counts: wire fraud, money laundering, stealing money from customers, which they basically admitted are his girlfriend. Last time that he's going to get effed by his girlfriend on that one. That was a meme I saw on Instagram. So good. Australia overtakes El Salvador as the crypto ATM hub of the world. And if you guys remember those mutant ape NFTs, you know, the big monkeys with the earrings and everything, the creator of those was charged for an alleged 2.9 rug pull scheme for fraud. So you essentially has been duped by a child in this whole NFT rigmarole. NFT founder of another set of NFTs called Goobers admitted to gambling away all of investors' money as well on his Twitch stream. And Nigeria, in other news, is going to ban cash withdrawals on government accounts to try to promote their government coin, or CBDCs. It's coming, guys. Remember, I told you I never believed that Bitcoin was going to be the future. It might still exist. It might go up and down, but the real thing is going to be the blockchain. All the governments are going to hop on that because they want absolute control. And you're not going to be able to go out and buy anything without their permission. And Silvergate, the largest crypto bank in the world, plunged over 40% after they had an $8.1 billion crypto meltdown. This complete meltdown of the cryptos, I think, are literally getting to the point where it's starting to affect everything. The contagion just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I hope it's probably not going to stop right now, but hopefully it'll stop soon. Bitcoin overall for the week was up 2% to just above 16,500, and it's a positive for the year. It's up over 2% for 2023. Unfortunately, it's a negative almost 60% year over year. In commodities, the U.S. has tied Qatar as the world's top exporter of LNG, or liquefied natural gas. If you guys didn't know, the liquefied natural gas from the U.S. is going to Europe. I wonder why they blew up the pipeline. Now you know. The preppers are right. It was a modest increase for Qatar, but a huge leap in the U.S. since the U.S. started exporting the liquefied natural gas only in 2016 from the lower 48 states. California's snowpack is the highest in 40 years. In this news of climate change, if you guys don't see the patterns, I don't know if I'm the only one that sees this, because since I've been in the industry now for about 23 years, the trading and the finance industry, it seems like what's happening, and I told you guys that we're going to have a lot of environmental problems over the next decade, and social problems and economic problems, but it seems like we're walking into extremes. Notice California had the worst drought in 1,200 years, and now all of a sudden they have the highest snowpack in 40 years. It's just like nothing in the middle. Here in Medellin, Colombia, for example, it hasn't stopped raining for 2.5 years. Literally hasn't stopped raining. I had to redo a deck, and I couldn't redo the deck because it kept raining and the wood had to dry. Russia crude shipments slid lowest for 2022 in the final 4 weeks of the year as the Russian sanctions are starting to affect their exports. And overall, U.S. crude and Brent were both down big. The U.S. crude was down almost 9% to 73.77, while Brent is down over 9% to 78.57. This has to do with the expectation of the economy, in addition to the situation with China and the struggles with the pandemic, and milder winter weather with Europe. So notice the absolute bomb of snow that we had over the Christmas season in the United States, and then winter in Europe was mildly warm. You see how it's not like uniform, it's just like extremes everywhere. That's really weird for me. The world is experiencing a sand shortage for construction mostly. Many people don't know that if water is the most consumed commodity in the world, sand is actually number 2, most than anything, the sand that they use for construction materials. And they can't use, it's kind of weird, right? Well, there's a bunch of sand in the ocean and there's sand in the deserts. Why can't they use that sand? That they can't use because it's not compact enough, right? They're not able to compact it for construction. So the world is literally running out of sand. And now China has sent out pirates to be able to go ahead and secure sand samples. This is the kind of news that, so we're not only out of corn, coffee, wheat, soybeans, plastic, cardboard. I had a list of everything here, but now even sand is starting to go away. And that's kind of one of the reasons I love to do these videos, because who would know that, right? You don't see that on the mainstream media. Precious metals surged higher on Tuesday. They hit a 6-month peak this week. Gold went up by 2.25% to 1866, while silver went down 0.66% to just under $24. Inflation in 2022, I showed you guys in the beginning of the video this picture, but food, I mean, it's just go and learn how to do something else, because your salary isn't going up 50% a year to keep up with inflation. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Mortgage apps in 2022 were down 42% year over year. They're planning, since everybody became a realtor because it was so easy to sell houses, they're not expecting that 30% of the realtors in the housing market or the housing space can actually quit during this crash. Germany and both France had lower than expected inflation. In Germany, they went down to 9.6%, while France was 6.7%. Croatia, which is a country in Eastern Europe, it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. You literally have the beach in front of you, the mountains in the back. It's on the Adriatic coast across from Italy. 4 million people, now the 20th country to join the euro. It'll probably help their tourism quite a bit, because 20% of their GDP is just tourism. And they also now are part of the Schengen area, so you can literally go to Croatia without having to show your passport. 26 countries now, the largest freely moving kind of group, with 420 million Europe. In 420 million people, not 420 million Europe. UN's Food Agency Average Price Index, is called the FAO, has reached its highest level since the record started in 1990. So literally the index where they keep the price of the food has gone up the highest since they started tracking the food in 1990. This is what I'm telling you guys. Start trading, start doing, do something. Inflation in the EU dropped to the second consecutive month in December. Came out at 9.2%. Remember, it's a lot higher than that. And mortgage lender in the UK called Halifax, they announced that houses have slid in December, which is the 4th consecutive month. The drop in the housing prices in the UK now has been the largest since the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. The US Treasury yields are mostly lower this week, with the inversion between the 3-month and the 10-year starting to accelerate. Remember, whenever we see the interest on the Treasury bond, meaning the debt, the short-term debt of the United States, when that goes up, and then the interest rate on the longer-term debt, like the 10-year, goes down, and the short-term is higher than the long-term, that means that people are scared of what's going to happen. They want to be liquid, so they put their money in the shorter-term debt. And when that starts to get wider, that's a really good indication of the recession that's coming. U.S. automaker GM saw a 2.5% increase in U.S. new vehicles. They're now producing more vehicles than Toyota in the United States. Toyota is still, I believe actually not Volvo. I believe the Volkswagen is the biggest automaker in the world. Political news, they finally have a U.S. House Speaker after 4 days of going back and forth and not getting enough votes. First time in 100 years that it's gone to a second ballot. I think this was like the 9th or the 10th ballot in the United States Congress. Young adults in Chicago and Philadelphia are now at higher risk of death from gun violence than Iraq and Afghanistan. This with Chicago having the strictest gun laws in the country. If you guys go to Texas or Florida, for example, or Montana that has the most guns, they don't have any problems with gun deaths like Chicago does. So I wonder what the problem could be there. They're both run by Democrats. I try not to get political, but young people, they don't need to die. Virgin Islands AG, the Attorney General, was fired 3 days after suing JP Morgan Chase after suing them over the role they had of Jeffrey Epstein. So that basically tells you and I that it's a club, but you and I ain't in it. right? Kanye West gets debanked and canceled because he says anti-Semitic comments, but Jeffrey Epstein can run an entire pedophile ring of things that you should definitely not do, but he can keep his bank. Let's help him out, says Chase. More U-Haul trucks are leaving California than any other state in 2022. Texas is the top destination. Remember that California is the most left communist country in the entire United States. So I would recommend you guys, as from a person in the free state of Florida, don't go to Texas or any other state and vote like you do in California, because that's how you created that mess in the first place. Missouri bill is going to take steps toward treating gold and silver as money in the state as well, which is probably something you guys should have in your investment. Remember, I'm not a trading advisor. Do your own research. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva in Economic News is saying that the global economy faces a tough year and expecting 1/3 of the world to be in a recession, more than anything due to the fact that the biggest three economies, being the United States, China, and Europe, are going to slow down simultaneously. Obviously, Europe is not a country, but with the euro, they kind of function as one economy. U.S. manufacturing contracted further in December for the second straight month, and the U.S. jobless claims increased by 19,000 to 204,000 in a week ending in Saturday. People are already starting to receive their benefits, and the job news that they reported, which was I think I have it here. I'll say it here in just a moment. U.S. ended 2022 with strong job growth and wage gains, even though it was hit by inflation, and more jobs were added to the expected jobs that were created. It came in at 223,000 instead of 200. And inside the strong jobs report, which is something that they don't report, for example, there were 679,000 part-time jobs and minus 1,000 full-time jobs, meaning that there weren't 679,000 jobs created. There were 679,000 jobs that people started getting outside of their normal work. So people are getting second and third jobs now, if that makes sense. The U.S. services industry contracted for the first time in 2002 and since 2.5 years. And Chile, after they voted for the first communist in history, has the highest inflation in 31 years at 12.8%. Corporate news, a lot of layoffs happening this week. Salesforce is planning to let go of 10% of its workforce, or 8,000 people. Amazon said that they're going to let go of up to 18,000 jobs. Amazon being one of the largest employers in the United States with over 1.5 million people. And Tesla hit the lowest level since August 2020. It dropped 12% to 108 after they didn't meet their expected deliveries, even though they had over 400,000 deliveries, which is the most on record for them. They didn't meet what the expectation was, and that's why it's down. Could also be because Musk is getting into the political arena and people don't like that. Over 800,000 EVs are sold in the United States, and Tesla has 65% of that market share. And another stat I thought was really interesting is 88% of the cars in Norway are electric. Apple fell almost 4% now that there are reports that they're going to cut demand as well. So it looks like people starting to come back on their spending. Remember, the United States is almost 70% consumer spending, meaning that if you and I stop spending our money, the economy is going to go to the toilet. Walgreens fell over 6% after they had an unadjusted loss of $3.7 billion in the third quarter last year. And Bed Bath & Beyond is stating that they might go into bankruptcy now that they can't get their balance sheet in order. Their stock went down over 50% this week alone, and they're down 48% in 2023 already. Over 90% year over year. Trade news, the Chinese officials are discussing to start importing coal again from Australia. Probably a good idea since the prices of everything are going up. And in technology, Qualcomm has developed a new chip called Snapdragon Ride Flex SoC. Now, if you guys didn't know, everything is electric now, right? So everything has chips inside of cars. Generally, the assisted driving or the computer that controls kind of the driving where you can take your hands off the wheel, they needed a separate chip for that, on top of the chip that you need for all the electronics in the car. So now supposedly they developed a chip that does 2 in 1. So you only need 1 chip instead of 2, which means that you could probably save a little bit of money on your car. Investment news, if you guys remember Jack Ma, which was the founder of Alibaba and Ant Group, he's letting go of the control of Alibaba and Ant Group now that You guys haven't heard from him in a while. He probably got shut down by the Chinese government. And Canada also has banned foreigners from buying residential properties to try to keep houses affordable for Canadians. In international events, Macron, the president of France, says that France is going to become the first country to provide Western-made armored tanks to Ukraine. After that, Germany said that they're going to provide them as well, Germany being the fourth largest arms provider in the world. And Mexico security forces got the son of the Chapo, which is the huge drug cartel boss. There was a bunch of violence that happened after that because obviously in Mexico, it's probably supported, not shunned upon to sell drugs, probably involved with the government, just like it is in the US. In Peru, anti-government protests continued against the government. And utilities in North California are trying to restore power to tens of thousands of people after they had an atmospheric river. Literally had like 30, 50 inches of snow just drop in a matter of hours or in a day or two, which is something that's really important, which is more of these extremes that I told you about. And an unusual facts this week, a giant tuna was auctioned for almost $300,000 as the ceremonial first New Year in the Tokyo's Toyoshi fish market. The Oma's bluefin tuna are known as black diamonds due to their high value. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.